Hello, this is Miss Kyler, and I'm going to be telling you about The Dream of the Rood. It's an example of Old English poetry, and it's written in alliterative verse. Make sure you look at the definition of alliteration and be able to recognize it as you read the poem. Okay, so The Dream of the Rood is one of the oldest examples of Old English literature that we actually have discovered. A fragment of it is found written in runic symbols on the Ruthwell cross. There's a video in this lesson that really talks about that. It's really interesting. And the full version of the poem was found written in the Vercelli Code Book in Old English. Okay? The Vercelli Code Book, just to understand that a little bit, is a collection of parchments that were found together that had sermons and poems written in Old English, and these were all discovered together in Italy. The poem exemplifies the introduction of Christianity to the pagan Anglo-Saxon culture, and we can see how it's written in a way that it will appeal to the culture of a warrior Viking type people. And just to go over a little bit of the important points, The Dream of the Rood it's a dream narrative. And just to tell you a little bit about that concept, a dream narrative, very often writers will use a dream narrative when they're telling a story that may not all at once be accepted or believed by their readers or their listeners. And so instead of saying, this is what happened, I walked up and I saw a cross and the cross talked to me, they do that and they say, I dreamed about it. That makes people more receptive to it and say, okay, I can believe that you actually dreamed about it. It may not actually have happened, but I can understand that you dreamed about it. And it's written in alliterative verse, and its use of kennings. So those are two terms in your lessons that you'll need to know. Alliteration, remember, is the repetition of the initial consonant sound. And in Anglo-Saxon poetry, you see that all the time. Every line will have lots of alliteration in it. And the use of kennings. And remember, kennings are those compound words that sort of symbolize what it's standing for. So instead of saying an ocean, we'd say whale road, because a road that a whale swims on is the ocean. So it's kind of like a little metaphor pairing two compound words together to mean something else. So look throughout the poem and notice the time that kennings are used. Also notice how they portray Christ and the cross in terms that a barbarian warrior would understand. Christ being portrayed as a strong, brave warrior, and the cross portrayed as a very loyal, dedicated thane who would lay down his life for the warrior. Okay, so it's interesting how we see this Anglo-Saxon portrayal of Christ, because we do see him as a very strong hero, and very often, like later on in the Renaissance, you see kind of a very weak, meek, mild-looking Christ. This one's very different, very strong, and very gallant and brave. And I'm just going to highlight, you have this in your lesson, the whole thing with all the little notes. I just want to highlight a couple of things. Okay, of course, when they talk about rood, they mean cross. That's just another word for cross. Also notice how the poem has two narrators. The first narrator is the warrior who's actually dreaming the dream and telling the story. And the second is the cross. The cross tells its own story from its own point of view of the crucifixion and how the cross felt during that. And we see our first little kenning there, speech bearers. So who are people? Who are things that bear speeches or hold speeches inside themselves? People. So they're talking about human beings. So after the speech bearers were in bed, emphasizing the idea of the intelligent oral society type people. Okay, we see an example of stained with sins. That's an example of alliteration. Okay, we'll see a lot more examples as we go along. Wondrous was that tree, so the W too. Wondrous was, that's another example of alliteration. So look for all the examples. And then finally, at this point, not long after line 25, it was years ago that I still remember. That's where we enter in where the cross is actually speaking. It talks about how he started out as a tree, and he was cut down, and he was made into this thing of destruction. And here we see where it says, Christ hastened with great zeal. He wished to climb upon me. He's not being forced. Here, this Christ is not being forced or to do anything. He's choosing. It's like when he goes onto the cross, he's running into battle. He's a brave, strong warrior. No one's going to push him around. He's choosing his destiny. And then the cross says, I was able to destroy all the enemies. Nevertheless, I stood firmly. So here again, Christ is portrayed as a great warrior, and the cross is his brave and loyal thing. Like, with one glance, with one blow, I could have fallen down and destroyed them all. But because Christ had ordered me to stand firm, I was going to do that. The young hero stripped himself then, strong and resolute. He ascended. No one's putting him on the cross. He's doing it on his own. He's rushing into battle. I think that's amazing. And of course here we see where the Rood, they pierced me with dark nails. On me the scars are visible. So he's identifying with Christ, just as a loyal thane in Anglo-Saxon culture should be seen to suffer with his leaders and his fellow warriors. That all goes with the idea of comitatus, that relationship between the Lord, the warrior, and his fellow warriors, all that brotherhood of warriors fighting together and joining together and commiserating together. And then later on in line 95, the dream actually speaks. So in the dream, the cross actually speaks to the dreamer. It's interesting, you think, okay, I'm dreaming, that someone in the dream is talking to me, the dreamer. It's an interesting little relationship there. But the cross tells the dreamer, now I command you, my beloved warrior, that you tell this vision to men. And it's interesting because when he is telling it to the dreamer, the cross is actually saying it to all of society. It makes it something important for everyone. If that cross is commanding this one warrior, he's saying it to the whole society. Remember, that warrior represents everyone. Okay, here's a little reflection. As you go back and you read it and you mark it up and do whatever you need to do to help you understand the work, watch the videos that are included in the lesson. Take notes. Okay, some of those questions may be in quizzes or on the exam. Look for all the kennings and alliteration in the poem. Okay, I've mentioned that word several times, so you know that's important. Recognize when the two different narrators are speaking. One is it the dreamer, and one is it the cross that's speaking. And notice the Anglo-Saxon influence, how Christ is portrayed as a strong warrior, and the cross as his loyal thane. Also understand the connection between the cross and Christ in the concept of comitatus. I talked about that in the last slide or so. Okay? And also, again, make sure you read all the notes and read the full version of the poem. I'm glad that we were able to talk about this poem today, and I look forward to providing more videos for you. Okay? Bye.